The inward corner. Here is our pattern piece. That is our stitch line right here. And this is what your finished sample is going to look like. On the inside you can see trimming and grading, and clipping was done here in order for that corner to be able to turn right side out and lay nice and flat. Let's get started. We're going to lay our pattern piece snug against the edge of our fabric, as we don't need any seam allowance on those outer edges. I'm just going to trace the stitch line, mark my notches, then I need 1 inch of seam allowance on each of these edges. So I have a 1-inch ruler. Just lay it down and mark that inch very easily. Cut out the excess fabric that I don't need. And now we're going to flip our pattern for the other side. Mark our seam allowance and cut out that excess fabric. I'm going to lay our samples right sides together, and as they're straight lines we just need a few pins. We're going to start stitching at the end of the stitch line, back stitch, and then move forward. This is all on a 3-stitch length because this is a regular seam. Now when we get to a 1/2 inch from the corner, we are going to change to a 1-stitch length as before, and we are going to move forward until we are 1 stitch length from that corner. Remove pins if they're in the way. Now you want to stop stitching when you get within 1 stitch length of the corner. That's when you lift your presser foot, move your fabric so that you are now at a 45-degree angle across the point, turning the wheel with your hand so that you're in complete control. And when you reach your other stitch line, you're going to turn your fabric once again, and you're going to sew a 1/2 inch at that 1 stitch length. Then you're going to switch back to a 3-stitch length and finish out your seam, back stitching at the end of the seam. Remove any leftover pins, and let's take a look at that corner. You see how we've gone diagonally across that corner. Perfect. Now to reinforce this corner, because the clipping we're going to have to do, you're going to re-sew the 1/2 inch leading up to the corner, so at a 1 stitch length. Same steps as before, get within 1 stitch length of the corner, lift our presser foot, move our fabric, use the wheel to stitch across the corner, lift our presser foot, arrange our fabric, stitch for a 1/2 inch on a 1 stitch length, and then backstitch. There you can see the 2 rows of stitching right there at the corner. So now we're at the ironing table, and we have already pressed our stitching and trimmed our seam allowance down to a 1/2 inch, and now we are going to grade our seam allowance. So just 1 layer, cutting the length in half, so that one of our seam allowance is a 1/4 of an inch and one of our seam allowance is a 1/2 inch. Then we are going to clip right up to that stitch line at the apex of the corner. This is the only place that we clip. And it's important that you go right up to the stitch line. And this is going to enable our seam allowance to splay out so that we can turn our sample right side out. Now using steam only, We're going to prepare our fabric so that it is easy to finger roll the fabric right up to the stitch line. As always, we want a really crisp stitch line. It takes a lot of finessing, so just take your time, use more steam if you need it. And when you have really nice, crisp seams, then you will apply heat and pressure to your sample. Continue to manipulate your fabric as you are pressing to make sure it is doing what you want it to do. And go ahead and press your full sample to get it to lay nice and flat. And then turn your sample over and look at the apex of the point on the other side. Now I see that there's a little bit of puckering here, so I'm going to use steam and heat to relax the fabric so that I get a nice clean corner. And there you have it. And as you can see, the clipping has allowed the seam allowance to lay nice and flat.